So this past week, I fulfilled one of my bucket lists. You'll never guess what it was. A couple of us drove to Kentucky, and I went to Buc-ee's. And I ate everything I could get my hands on. And I came back with a stomach flu for the last 3 days. So I'm a little off my game. I'm a little kind of queasy still, but yeah, wouldn't do that again. When I first went to the seminary, I had a really rough time. Not only was a seminary in southern Indiana, like in the middle of nowhere, away from civilization. I mean, you could walk miles and miles and only see cows. There's just nothing down there. I would think it took like an hour and a half to drive to the nearest town to get anything, and it was just a little town. That's changed now, but back then there was nothing. Also, I was in an environment of all guys, which I wasn't used to. And I didn't realize, this may really be a shock to most of you, but when I was younger, I was hot. And so I had developed a tendency to rely on a lot of young ladies around me all the time and kind of give me lots of attention. And that boyish charm simply did not work in the seminary. But the biggest problem that I faced was I struggled academically. All through my academic career up to that point, teachers would say, give me very low marks on effort. I was described as lazy. How I got into college, I'm not quite sure, but by the will of God. When I got to the seminary, the first semester, I was put on academic probation. I just wasn't doing very well at all. It was at that time they decided to test me. I didn't know they even had tests to give, but I was diagnosed as having dyslexia. And they brought the county in to try to give me remedial reading so that I could learn to read. I was reading at a 5th grade level in college, and I was just struggling. And so that remedial reading was simply like what little kids in 1st and 2nd grade have. It was a book like See Sally Run, 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 Sally Run. You know those books? Yeah. So I had to start reading that kind of literature. My classmates found out about it, and I began to be brutally mocked all the time. Would stand in line in the cafeteria. The guy behind me would say, "See, Sammie tried to learn." I was called dummy. I was called stupid. And after a while of hearing so many people tell you that, you begin to believe it. I was struggling with my regular classes and then trying to do this thing with the county and really learn how to read in an entirely different way than I ever tried before. And I was really discouraged, so much so it began to affect my health. I developed colitis, and I got put on a mild tranquilizer. And I just began to think, like, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'd be better off doing something else in life. And it was around that time when I was contemplating leaving the seminary that an upperclassman, I was sitting at lunch one day by myself, he came up and he said, "Do you mind if I sit down with you?" And I thought, okay, here we go, he's going to set me up. And he said, "You're really having a rough time here, aren't you?" There was something sincere about his voice, so I engaged him. And we had lunch, and then we went for a walk, and he said something to me that today is a cliche, but I never heard it before. So if you never hear a cliche before, it's really profound. And he said, "What doesn't kill you will make you stronger." And he really encouraged me to work with the county and to pick that up. He says, "I believe that you have a vocation. I believe that you can learn to read. And once you learn to read, your grades will go up." And sure enough, by the end of that semester, I had learned to read an entirely different way, and my grades shot up. I went from academic probation to the dean's list in one semester. So I guess I wasn't dumb. I mean, there was evidence proving now that I could do this. That second year in the seminary, Matt, that's the guy that approached me, we became really good friends, and we actually were roommates together. And so in our room, those rooms weren't that big, but there was a bed here and a bed there, a big window, and in between he had a stereo. Do you guys remember what stereos are like, what you put vinyl records on? And so that was right there in between us. And so because he was in a different class than I was, we didn't share classes. So in the evening around 9 o'clock when we come in to go to bed, we would talk and start talking about what the day was. And the next thing we know, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. That went on for a couple days, and Matt said, this ain't going to work. He says, so here's the deal. I'll put on 2 albums. Remember what an album is? I'll put on 2 albums, and when the last song of the second album plays, you shut up. And I'll shut up. And so that's what we did. And the last album, it's really going to date me, was Neil Diamond's Taproot Manuscript. And the last song on side A, for you younger people, those vinyl records had songs on the first side and songs on the second side. That last song by Neil Diamond was He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. And that was never a hit for real. It was a cover for Neil Diamond. And so every night when He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother would play, we would shut up and go to sleep. Later that semester, Matt started having medical problems. And it was discovered that he had cancer. And he went home to Detroit for treatment. We didn't have cell phones in those days, so we couldn't text one another. So the only way you could communicate was longhand writing through snail mail. And so we would write back and forth until he got to the point that he really couldn't write that often. And I was coming back to the seminary after summer break for my senior year, and I'm driving, and down in southern Indiana, you drive around in the middle of nowhere, and you have all these hills and farms and cows, and all of a sudden, when you get to St. Meinrad, you go over a hill, and there comes this massive Abbey church. It's really powerful when you first see it. Just as I came over there, on the radio, Neil Diamond's song, He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother, started playing. And I thought, wow, I've never heard, because it wasn't a hit by him. I've never heard this on the radio. It was really... So, of course, I'm thinking of Matt, and I pull up, and a bunch of guys come out to greet me and to help me unload my stuff. And the first thing they say is, sorry about Matt. Cancer won, and we lost Matt. And it was very sad. But I have to tell you that over the past 50 years, Matt's always been with me. And I have tried over and over and over again to follow his example of reaching out to people who I think are going through a rough time, to be with them and to support them. Matt's friendship with me changed my life. There are authentic friendships that last throughout our lives, who truly impact us for the good. One of my favorite authors while I was in college, after I learned to read, was Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he wrote this. He said, the only way to have a friend is to be a friend. Now, there's someone who truly is a friend to all of us, and that's Jesus Christ. Friendship is a covenant binding 2 people together. And Jesus paid for that covenant by his blood. In today's gospel, Jesus does for us, his friends, what we should all do for our friends. He prays for us. He asks the Father that we may all be one, that we might be together. And that is that we find a way through our differences, through our preferences, through our various perspectives, to forge a way to unity. Remember a couple weeks ago, I told you that the love that Jesus demands, especially that John's gospel preaches is not entirely defined by feelings. Rather, it is an act of the will. It's always easy when someone lets you down, because we can all have examples of friends who have let us down, right? Friends who maybe even betrayed us. It's so easy when one of those situations occur for us to walk away. But we shouldn't do that, because Jesus doesn't do that to us. How many times have we let the Lord down? How many times by the things that we say, the things that we do, the things that we fail to say, and the things that we fail to do we let Jesus down? Has he ever walked away from us? No. And so we should not walk away from others. I've never known a true friendship that has not demanded of me sacrifices that have always made me better. As I said, Matt's been gone 50 years, but there's hardly a time that I don't think about Matt, that I don't think of his example, of his kindness to me. I don't think I'd be here if he hadn't stepped in and encouraged me at the lowest time in my life. But as important and as impactful as that relationship is, my relationship with Jesus overcomes that by far. Jesus, we've talked about this for years here, developing a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, having a friendship with the Lord. He is the only one that you can go to in the middle of the night that's going to be patient enough to listen. He's the only one that truly cares. He understands us better than we understand ourselves. And he will comfort us and care for us and encourage us. And at times, yes, kick us in the backside when we need it to challenge us to be better. If you haven't developed that personal relationship with Jesus, what are you waiting for? None of this makes sense without that. It is the core. And those people who have gone through Alpha, through the Rescue Project, and who have developed that relationship with Jesus, everything changes. Everything we do here has more meaning. Everything in life becomes like Technicolor when before it was black and white. What are you waiting for? And if you have a relationship with Jesus, part of being a disciple is the continual process of surrendering, of letting go of the vestiges within us that are selfish and are controlling, and let the Lord take over. Yes, we truly have a friend in Jesus. Let the church say.